Hello everyone! So welcome sa ating first topic for the second quarter. So ngayong araw na ito ay tatalakayin natin ang iba't ibang uri ng variations. So meron tayong una, direct variation. Pangalawa, inverse variation. Pangatlo, joint variation. At ang pang-apat ay ang combined variation. So ngayong araw na ito ay didiscuss ko kung paano mag-translate ng variation statement into mathematical equation. Pero bago ang lahat, huwag kalimutang mag-like at mag-subscribe sa aming channel para ikaw isang maging matalinong Noipi. So, welcome sa ating first lesson ngayong second quarter. Ito ang variation. So, first, let's define what is a variation. So, variation comes from the root word vary, which means change. So, it deals with the changes in the values of the variables. So, in every variation, there is what we call constant, and the constant is a value that does not change. So, in variation, it is usually represented by letter K. So, sa lahat ng types ng variations, hindi mawawala tong letter K na to. Yan. Also, we have four types of variations. So, we have direct variation, and inverse variation that involves two variables, and then joint variation and combined variation that involves three or more variables. So, unahin muna natin yung direct at inverse variation. So, direct variation, it involves two variables, and then the values of two variables go in the same direction. So, let's have an example. We are given this table of values, and then the values of x are 2, 4, 6, 8, and 10. And then the values of y are 6, 12, 18, 24, and 30. So, if you notice, as the value of x increases, the value of y also increases. Let's have another example. So, the value of x here are 48, 36, 27, 21, and 15. And then the values of y are 16, 12, 9, 7, and 5. So, as x decreases, y also decreases. Yan. Kaya nga sabi dito, the values of two variables go in the same direction. And then the ratio of one variable to another is the constant. Now, let's go to inverse variation. So, inverse variation, it involves two variables, and then the values of two variables go in opposite direction. Magkaibang direction naman. So, let's have an example. So, we have here the values of x are 2, 5, 10, 20, and 25. And then, the values of y here are 50, 20, 10, 5, and 4. So, as the value of x increases, if you notice, the value of y decreases. So, magkaiba yung direction nila. Yung isa increases, yung isa decreases. So, let's have another example. Values of x here are 24, 12, 6, 4, and 2. And then the values of y here are 2, 4, 8, 12, and 24. So, here, as the values of x decreases, the values of y increases. So, again, magkaiba sila ng direction. So, the product of two variable or two variables is the constant. So how do we translate variation statements into mathematical equation? So for direct variation, the key phrases na kailangan natin tandaan para masabing direct variation yon ay merong nakalagay na varies directly as, is directly proportional to, and then is proportional to. Ayan. So, how do we translate this statement into mathematical equation? So, first, yung unang variable, so we have here y equals k, which is the constant, and then the second variable, which is the x. Idudugtong lang natin yan. Now, let's have the inverse variation. So, what is the key phrases naman ba for the inverse variation? So, the key phrases here are varies inversely, is inversely proportional to. So, how do we translate this statement into mathematical equation? So, we have here, ang unang variable ay y, and then the second variable is x. So, yung first variable, y equals k, and then yung second variable, ilalagay na natin siya sa denominator. So, x yung second variable, so magiging denominator siya. So, we have y is equal to k over x. Okay, let's have this one. Translate the following into mathematical equation. So, identify natin kung anong type ng variation, and then yung translation. First, the cost, so letter C of the fish, varies directly as its weight, W. So, this is a direct variation, and then the translation for this statement is, ano ba yung unang variable? C. And then, second variable is W. So, we have, so C, ang unang variable, and then W yung second variable. So, we have C is equal to KW. Number 2, the area A of a triangle is directly proportional to its height. So, ang first variable ay A, second variable is H. So, number 2 is an example of direct variation because of the word directly proportional. So, the mathematical equation of this statement is yung unang variable is A, and then second variable is H. So, the mathematical equation or the translation is A is equal to KH. Number 3 example. The speed, so letter S, of a moving object varies inversely to the time t it traveled. So, nakalagay dito, varies inversely. So, this is an example of inverse variation. So, unang variable is S, second variable is letter T. So, how do we translate this statement? So, we have S is equal to K over T. Number 4, the electric current, so I, varies directly as the voltage. So, letter V. So, number 4 is an example of direct variation because of the word varies directly. And then the first variable is I. And then the second variable is letter V. So, we have I is equal to K and then V. Number 5, P is inversely proportional to Q. So, the word is inversely proportional. So, this is an example of inverse variation. So, what is the mathematical equation of this statement? So, we have P is equal to K over Q. Number 6. The number of workers, W, varies inversely as the number of days, letter D, the job can be finished. So the word or the key phrases is inverse or varies inversely. The first variable is W and then the second variable is D. So we have W is equal to KD. Number 7. The volume V of a cylinder varies directly as the square of the radius R of its base. So take note of the word square of the radius. So number 7 is an example of direct variation. We have V is equal to K R squared. Kasi may nakalagay dyan na square of the radius. Last example. Number 8. So, B varies inversely as the cube of C. So, number 8 is an example of inverse variation. We have B is equal to K over C cube. Take note of the word cube. Okay, let's have the joint variation. So, for the joint variation, it is similar to direct variation but involves 3 or more variables. So, parang halos parehas lang sila ng direct variation, mas madami lang siyang variable. So, key phrases for joint variation are varies jointly or jointly proportional. So, A varies jointly as B and C. So, parang same nga lang ng direct variation. So, unang variable, A, equals to K. Hindi mawawala yung K. And then, idudugtong lang natin yung mga kasunod niya na variable. So, we have B, C. So, we have a mathematical equation. A is equal to K, B, C. Next example, W varies jointly as X, Y, and Z. So, it involves 4 variables. So, again, yung unang variable is W equals K, and then dudugtong lang yung X, Y, and Z. Okay, now let's have the combined variation. So, combined variation, it involves 3 or more variables. So, pinag-combine lang tong variation na to. So, makakabasa kayo ng dalawang types ng variables doon. So, we have direct inverse and then joint inverse variation. Combination yon. So, example, sa direct inverse muna tayo. Para siyang pinagdugtong na dalawang variation. So, sa direct, A varies directly as B, di ba? We translate it as A is equal to KB. Then, A varies inversely as C, so we translate it as A is equal to KC. So, sa combine, ipagko-combine lang tong dalawang variation na to. There. So, we have A varies directly as B and inversely as C. So, this is an example of combined variation. So, how do we translate this? So, basta tandaan nyo kapag may inversely, after ng word na inversely, sa baba na yung variable. So, first variable is A. We have A is equal to KB and then inversely, ano yung variable after ng word na inversely? So, C. Magiging denominator na yung variable after ng word na inversely. So, let's translate this following variation statement into mathematical equation. Again, we're going to identify what type of variation and then the translation or the mathematical equation. Number 1. Y varies jointly as X and Z. So this is an example of joint variation. So we have Y is equal to K, X, Z. Number 2 example. Z varies directly as X and inversely as Y. So direct, may inversely din. So this is an example of combined variation. So we have the first variable Z. So we have Z is equal to Kx over Y. So after ng word na inversely, ang sumunod sa kanyang variable ay Y. So kaya nasa denominator siya. Number 3, for a given interest rate, simple interest I varies jointly as the principal P and time T. So, number 3 is an example of joint variation. So, wag nyo kalimutan kapag capital ang given, capital din yung nasa translation nyo. Kapag small case, small letter case din yung nasa translation nyo. So, the mathematical equation of this statement is I is equal to K, P, T. So, kaya capital yung nandito sa mathematical equation. And then, yung letter T naman, lowercase. Number 4, the volume V of a rectangular prism varies jointly as the length of its side, h, and then the length and the width. So, this is an example of joint variation again. So, what is the mathematical equation of this statement? So, the first variable here is V. So, we have V is equal to K, H, L, W. Okay, number 5. Na-reveal ko na yung tamang sagot. So, gravitational attraction G between two bodies varies jointly as their masses. So, m sub 1 and m sub 2. And inversely as the square of the distance between them. So, number 5 is an example of combined variation. So, the mathematical equation for number 5 is G is equal to Km sub 1, Km sub 2 over D squared. So, I'll see you for the next video. Bye!